Recording is on.
Hi, so this is meant to be a 3-time training on writer layout, um, and this is meant to be, shared code between Collabora Online and LibreOffice. So no matter where you are coming from, this is meant to be useful for you. Um, this is a very complex area of writer. So of course we can't go into each and every corner with various details, but in the next 25 to 30 minutes, I would like to give you some overview on layout. So there are various layouts. It's summertime, so probably your first thought is a beach layout. Of course, you can consider what to do there if you plan to create a beach. In the top right corner, as a to-do, there are some trees there, and trees are not that far from what we will be talking about, because we will talk about layout frames, and that's basically a structure of various layout frames, and then that forms a tree. So when we have a writer layout, that's meant to be a layer between the writer document model that you are mutating as you edit document and the rendering. The document model is something that I covered in an earlier TTT. It's what you mutate. It's in a form which is easy to import from an on-disk file, and it's easy to serialize back. Of course, it has its own complexities, but it's roughly in that form. In case you have a document with 10 paragraphs, then in the ODT file or docx file, there will be, you can find some XML markup of 10 paragraphs. And the document model will have 10 text notes for you. So there is a one-to-one mapping there. Now, how you paint this on the screen is a bit more difficult because on the screen, we want to present things in terms of paginated layout, and not everything on the screen rendering has an equivalent in the document model. So that's a quite expensive calculation. For example, we don't have pages. You just keep typing, keep adding new documents, and all of these page insertion and deletion is kind of implicit, and it's up to a task for the layout to calculate. So in case for every render, you would have to do all this calculation from the document model every time. It would be quite slow. What you want between the two is kind of a cache. It's some middle representation which has concepts about headers, footers, pages, and so on, and can act as a layer between the document model and the actual painted pixels in tiles. So that's why we have frames, and that's why we have layout. So for the layout, the root of the container is, as its name says, is the root frame. This will have a list of pages, and then we can go into details from there. So you can always navigate between these frames. You can always go to an upper level, and the only frame which has in many cases, I will give you a simplified picture just to make sure that we stay within the available time. So with the simplified picture, the only frame that has no parent is the root frame. So you can always go up. Then for layout frames, you can go lower. So for body tags or header frames or footer frames or table frames, you can go lower and go to the first contained frame. You can go to the next or previous one. So a frame at the start of a page won't have a previous one, but the next one, and the frame at the bottom of the page will have no next frame. And we also have some precede and follow relationship for split frames, like this split text frame. In case you have a paragraph which is spanning over 2 pages, then you will have a split text frame there. That's roughly how we can navigate. And so that's how the root frame looks like. And if we go one layer down, then we will get to page frames. Page frame has a parent, the root frame. For one open document, there is one layer. and then that layout will have exactly one root frame. And somebody may want to mute their microphone. And what's special about the page frame is that it has no corresponding model object. There is no page node. The node array is at its most simple form, just a list of paragraphs. And at the layout level, we have page frames. So that's something that the layout needs to take care of to find out how many pages do we need to represent all the content in the document model. The pages are a double linked list, so all of the middle pages have a pointer to next and previous pages, except the first and the last one. And also, as a children of one page, it contains these layout frames. At least it contains a body frame for body text in case there are headers and footers configured for the page style, which is relevant for that page. Then it can have a header frame or footer frame or both, and then in this order you have the header frame, body frame, footer frame. Now, if we let's assume that you have a very simple document, so no header, footer, just a body frame. Then inside the body frame you have the text frame, and so the typical parent for the text frame is the body frame, and most writer documents are primarily containing text, so this is kind of the most important frame. It has a layout counterpart. It's the layout counterpart of the text node, and also again, simplified picture is that there can be multiple text frames for one text node. So it will have some information about where to start rendering the text of the text node. So in case you have a split node, a node which has two text frames, and then this text frame is split, then you will have one text frame which will start from the 0 offset, and you will have a second text frame which will start at some positive offset. This can be complicated in case you have change tracking, which are called internally red lines, and those changes are hidden. Then you can have the situation that one text frame is presenting content from multiple paragraphs, but that's something I am just putting on aside. Next week, Mihail will have a whole TTT just on those red line things. So we will ignore that here. And after that, there is some notification mechanism between these frames and nodes. So the SW text frame is registered in the text node, which means that in case you as a user modify the text node, let's say you delete some character or insert one or so, then this text node will know what are the text frames to notify. Now, what is inside those text frames apart from, it is now rectangle, we saw the picture. The two important parts there or members there are the frame area and the frame print area. The frame area is basically defines where the frame is and what is its size, and this includes the margins. It is an absolute rectangle, so it has absolute position. You don't need to look at the parent to see where to paint that. Inside that, there is the frame print area, and that excludes the margins, and this is relative. So in case you don't have any paragraph margins, then your frame print area will be at position 0, 0, and your frame print area size will be exactly the same as the frame area one. Now, we have layout frames, which are similar to the normal frames, except normal frames can go lower, so they can contain other frames. And then for any functionality which is around containing other frames, that's layout frames, and then everyone derives from this SW layout frames. So the body frame, table frame, header frame, footer frame, all these are layout frames. Then we have seen this nice creature called flow frame. Flow frame is something which can be split across pages or other type of containers. It might be a chained fly frame, like chained text boxes, multiple ones created explicitly and then content flows between these, or it can be multiple pages or multiple columns or something like this. Or there's functionality that you have some content and you want to make sure that it flows between multiple items of that chain or flow frames. Now, this is separate enough that actually SW flow frame is not an SW frame, so it's a separate class, and then you inherit from both in case you want the functionality. Also, relatively recently, at least like in writer code-based terms, the floating tables were implemented also as flow frames. So in the past, in case you had some add character anchored content, which is this add content fly frame, that was something that you had to anchor to one specific paragraph, and then that was it. You had to make sure that all the content inside that fly frame is inside one page. And nowadays, this add content fly frame is deriving from SW flow frame, which was the basis to make sure that it's possible to split these fly frames across multiple pages, which gives you something which is called floating tables on the word side. Then we also have anchored objects. So that's something, an image or a text frame or a chart or a shape, something that you can place on a page, and they will have an anchor, and the layout makes sure that in case the wrap type is set in that way, then the text content, the body text will flow around these anchored objects. And now in case this is some native writer content, and these are fly frames. In case these are shapes which is shared code with Calc and Impress, then there's these SW anchored objects. And then the anchor frame is aware of what are the objects registered in that anchor frame. Also, these objects know they are anchors, and we also have a per page tracking, so you can always relatively easily know if that page has any anchored objects and so on. Then perhaps let's look at a very high level what is the layout algorithm does. There are these these famous bug reports on the layout never ends, and then we have these layout loops, and those are almost never too straightforward to figure out how to fix them. But the layout then does something. So what does it do? Like the first goal is to make sure that you can determine the frame area and the frame print area for all the frames in the layout. Once you have that, then you have some idea where to paint content of those frames, and that's how you roughly try to paint the document. To be able to determine this frame area, frame print area, you need to do a couple of things. We have a number of entry points to the layout procedure. In case something goes wrong at a specific area, then you can always look at what is the frame in that area. And all these frames have a couple of methods which are useful to look at. So the highest level one is this make all, which tries to do everything. In case it's a multi-page table, then it will take care of perhaps splitting that table or joining some empty table at the next page, know that it has less content. It will do the positioning for you. It will take care of the sizing and everything. In case it's not make all itself that is at fault, then there is also make position for all these frames. This is focused on just the positioning. We don't care about what's the size of this frame. We don't care how the margin is used and what is the available size for the actual usable area for the content. This is just about the positioning. And then format is taking care of the size of that frame and also the whole print area. There is also XML dump for all this layout structure. So both in GDB or with an environment variable and some keystroke, you can generate an XML dump of that layout representation. That can be sometimes very useful. You can do an XML dump. You can step through the code line by line and change and dump the XML the layout into an XML file again, and you can analyze how it changes and then draw conclusions on where the code is changing something, which is interesting to you. Let's look at what's the relationship between these frames and like layout level frames and model level nodes. So the way these are linked is that there is a base class called SW modify. This is kind of a server. You can register into that and get updates. And there is the SW client, which is typically inherited from by frames, layout frames, and you can listen to changes with this. And that means you have the text node, which is an SW modify, and you have a text frame, which is an SW client. You have the table node and table frames, and so on. In most cases, one node may broadcast changes to multiple frames, but not the other way around, except red lines, because red lines have to complicate things. So that would be something different. But in other parts of the code, this is how it works. Then, okay, initially when you just open the document, the importer will create a document model for you, and then the importer is done. It hands over the execution flow to the layout. So how is that happening? The node classes are responsible to create the matching frames. So, for example, you press the enter key at the end of the paragraph, then you create a new node, and the new node will have its make frames member function executed, and that creates the SW text frame or text frame instances, depending on how many of those are necessary, and it will try to insert it at the right part of the layout. Now, if you don't just have paragraphs, but something complex like tables, then you need a table layout for that. So we have the matching layout level frames for that as well. So for SW tables in the model, we have table frames. For SW table lines in the model, we have row frames. For SW table boxes, we have cell frames. And each of these frame classes try to take care of their own formatting. This also means that one misconception would be that tables in writer have columns. No, there are no columns. The UI tries to make this up. So in case you can have a feature at the UI level where you resize a column, but what it will do is it will try to guess if all the rows have similar list of cells, and then at a UI level, at high level, it might seem like you have a column. So you can do something with that. But at the model level and at the layout level, there is no such thing as a table column. Once we have these frames positioned in some way, it also happens that the user likes to click around at various places, and then you need to somehow talk about positions at almost like pixel positions on the screen, and also positions in the model. So how do we map between these things? We have a paragraph index in the model, and those are like node index, which is roughly the paragraph index in case you just have paragraphs. Once you have these node indexes, then you can have an offset to the node array. So you have a paragraph index which causes as the node offset, and inside that there can be also a character index. So you can say that you want the third character of the first paragraph or something like that. So that is the model side, and at the layout level, it's a bit different because we have the text frame index, which is a separate type. There is no implicit conversion between these two. One reason for this is that in case, again, hidden red lines, you can have a case where you are navigating inside the same text frame in the layout, but the source of that text might come from different nodes. So that will be then different character index. Also, fields like to have this, that you have one dummy character, but you have that expands to multiple characters, and then your text frame level index is no longer matching the model index. So we have explicit conversion between these two. maybe that's everything about the core of the format and the layout. We would look at a little around like how the text formatting works with these primitives that we have so far. So the first thing is I told you a little bit about this coordinate system already. So this is one big canvas. All the pages are on a single canvas. We for all the frames we talk in terms of absolute trips. The top left corner of this canvas is the 0, and then we always calculate in trips. This has the benefit that this is a reasonably small unit, so you can just calculate in integers, and it's relatively rare that this leads to rounding problems. Inside the frame area is also absolute, but then for the print area, that's a relative position. So that's something you need to watch out for. Now let's look at what is inside the text frame. That's a little bit different because we don't have frames for different lines. And those in case you have a single line, and let's say the first half of that is bold and the second half is not bold, we call those portions, and those are not frames either. So by default, what you have inside the frame is a line portion, but there is a special case that this is the first portion in the line. Then you have a line layout, which inherits from the line portion, and you have the more special case that you are the first line, you are at the start of that first line. And so that portion is the paragraph portion, and that's how you have paragraph portions, line layouts, and line portions inside one text frame. Now you have some text, you specified some font, and then you want to paint text with that font. So this is a bit more complex than that, given that based on what range in the Unicode standard your characters are using, you can format a paragraph in a way that you specify 3 fonts for Latin script, CTR scripts, and CJK scripts. And you can specify all these 3, and writer will automatically use the relevant font for the relevant range. Which means that at the VCL level in the toolkit, you have just a font, but the writer equivalent for that is this SW subfont. And then there is the SW font, which is a wrapper around these 3 fonts, so that this complexity is hidden from you. Perhaps let's look at how incremental update to the layout works, because in case you press a single key, then we don't recalculate the entire layout from scratch. Yeah, simplified picture, but roughly it goes like you press a key, so the edit window will mutate the text node for you. The next text node text is modified, so it will notify its clients, and then the text frame has a callback in this SW client notify, which will try to update the text frame. We will construct some character range to find out what is the subset of the text frame content which has to be updated. Then we will call format so that the content of the text frame is positioned and sized in a suitable way. For that, typically it's not just everything is in that format implementation, but there is a formatter which will know how to do this. So we create a formatter, and the formatter has a way to build these portions that we were seeing in the picture around line layouts and paragraph portions and so on. So this is roughly how it works. Now, I talked a little bit about positions, like these 3 positions, which are not exactly pixel positions, but it's some position on the screen, except if you scroll up or down, then this is still kind of a logical position, but this is at the layout level, and you have the model positions. And sometimes you want to convert between these 2. So we have a function which takes model position, and it gives you 3 coordinates. Inherently, this might not work perfectly in all cases. Imagine that you have 2 pages and you have the same header for both, then you have 2 coordinates for one model position. But in many cases, you know that there is one view position and you want to have that. And in the other way around, it's a bit easier. So you can have some coordinate. Let's say you just click on the screen with your mouse somewhere and you want to know what is the closest model position. You can have that here. So there is some functionality for that. Let's talk a little bit about fields. That's a bit special because fields in the document model are just one dummy character with various properties. And let's say you have a page number. I'm on slide 22. So in case this would be on in writer on page 22, then this would be 2 characters. So this can easily expand to multiple characters at a layout level. And the cursor is always somewhere which has a model position. So if you travel with your cursor with the left right arrow keys, then you typically can't go after the first 2, but before the second 2 in that field expand result. But still, for example, accessibility needs this information. It wants to know the position of each and every character. So we have a special position structure which helps you with this. Now, mostly, most of the writer layout calculation is working in a way that if something is outdated, then we will recalculate that. But we still have something called an SW cache. You can argue if that's an actual cache or not. I guess that's somewhat interesting. On one hand, it's not really a cache because this is really information, or any portion inside the text frame is actually in this SW cache. And if you have a document with hundreds of pages and you scroll up and down a lot, then the least recently used parts of this portion container will just get deleted. And so it's kind of a cache because we just delete the information which looks like the least useful. At the same time, it's not a cache because this is what we will work with. There is no other place in the code where we will store these portions. But at least the good news is that it looks like a cache because the layout information is always something that comes from the model. You can always delete something and recreate it. Just in case you do it more incrementally, then we will get better performance. So we try to keep the recent portions around in the memory, but we don't do that for other frames. So there is some limited memory usage of writer. Now I'm almost done with what I would like to present. Just few more things. At the very start of the talk, we talked about this layout tree and how you navigate by. So perhaps that's useful to understand this terminology. So you have this, you can always go up and you can go low, you can go to next and previous frames. That's for the tree. And also for these flow frames, you have these links so that in case you have a split paragraph at the bottom of one page and you continue that at the top of the next page, then you can have these pointers between the various parts of that split frame. So we call these follow or precede pointers. And in general, if you want to talk about your neighbor, which is not the next and previous, but the logical one, then we talk about the previous leaf or next leaf. So this is useful to understand because the code is referring to these a lot. Also, in case you have split frames like split text frame or split table frame, then the first one we call that master, and everyone else are called a follow. So that's something to be aware of. And if you are tasked to work with the layout, then I would advise you to make sure that you take verbose notes on your investigation. It's very typical that you can't just sit down and in one go figure out some problem there, which means you need to take notes, and then next time you sit down to continue investigating, you will need to read your own notes and document your assumptions and verify those assumptions and so on. Michael had a whole presentation on this generic problem solving thing. But just to point out, this is complex enough that if you don't take any notes, it's not too likely that you will just fit everything into your head. Part of that is investigating in the debugger and then copy pasting the debugger output to your nodes. Also, you can create layout dumps, and then you can compare those layout dumps to see what is changing and so on. Luckily, with the layout XML dump, you can also write tasks for your fixes. So in case the document is of something, let's say 2 frames are overlapping, but they are not meant to be overlapping or something like that, then you can assert the relevant part of this layout dump with your asserts, and then you can make sure that at least that one specific case stays fixed. I have some links on partly from the old OpenOffice wiki and also in the code base. The SW README has part of what I presented here. And I guess that's the end. So, question time.
Okay, thank you, Miklos. And now, yes, questions time. Let's start from Attila. Attila, questions?
Hello, thank you for the this TTT. I don't know any question right now.
Okay, thank you, Balázs.
Thank you very much. Miklos, presentation. Yeah, no questions.
Okay, no questions. Thank you, Gebor Gogay. Questions? Gogay, Gebor. Okay,
Nothing from me.
thank you. Jaume, Joao, Jonathan, Justin. Questions? Okay. Thank you. Mevan, Michael. Mike.
I have a question. Is it reasonable to use XML to output state for debugging? So like in
I'm
two
not sure.
cases, and then
Could you please expand a little bit? I'm not sure I get the question.
So I have a bug that I'm investigating where copy pasting doesn't have the same effect once depending on the context. So then I can at least find exactly what's different in the final state of the frame or something, and compare at one point working state and not working state, and then
that can be a case. Of course, it's possible that something is wrong in the model, and obviously then the layout will be different, and that's working as intended, so that's fine. But whenever you start investigating a problem, you try to find a starting point, like where it is. Is that a rendering bug in some very high level, or is that lower at the layout? Is that in the model? So for that purpose, it's useful in many cases that you just load the document and you do something, you undo it, and then you don't get the same result. And what is it different? And you do 2 dumps and you try to diff those and see where that leads. Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Quick question from me, Miklos. I may have drifted in the middle there into another task that arrived, but I'm interested, as you know, in the laying out the document multiple different ways and how drawing pages and the drawing layer stuff integrates with the layout. I don't know if you covered that.
Not really. So that's a quite relevant question. My understanding is that so in theory, you could have multiple layouts for one model. So there is no, if you have simple content, then there is no reason why that can't be done. There are a couple of places in the code which are taking shortcuts by knowing that there will be just one layout. And this drawing part is perhaps the most difficult unsolved part of having multiple layouts there. So in case, whenever you have something that is a fly frame or a drawing object which is wrapped around by content, then we also create a matching draw object on the draw model. And that has its benefits, but that means that depending on if you have 1 page or 2 pages, for example, and you have headers, and in the header you have an image, which sounds unusual, but probably each and every organization template has at least 1 image in the header. So this is quite frequent. Then we will have for 2 pages image in the header, we will have 2 objects in the draw model, which means that the layout has some influence on the model, which is ugly, but it's how it is currently. Until that's not solved, you can't have multiple layouts, because otherwise you could, for example, you would like to hide track changes in one layout but not in the other. But the draw model can only do one thing, and you can't have both at the same time. So that needs a non-trivial amount of work. It's not impossible, but it will be a lot of work. But that's the direction we would go to if we have the time, I guess.
So what I hear is that if you don't have drawing images, you could have potentially 2 views, redlining and not redlining, but that's a rare special corner case, and it would be
Yeah. At least that's my understanding. For native writer content, where you don't need to interact with the draw things, just tables and text and so on, then you could have 2 layouts. All these notifications are designed in a way that there can be multiple layouts for the model.
Okay, so there's sort of a thought that we might one day win this one, and people are working in that direction and trying to avoid breaking that idea, but it still has a few breakage points.
Yeah, something like that. I think the people who typically touch the writer layout are aware of this, and we are not creating new things so that we would regress in this area. We are staying at one point.
Great.
At the moment.
And you say it's primarily headers and footers and having the same thing multiple times that's the issue. Is that right?
Anything which depends on the layout, the size of something. I think the easiest example is images in headers. I'm sure it's possible to come up with something else. For example, tables have repeated headers, and then you can have images there. And then again, depending on the amount of content you put into a table, you might have 1 or 2 image representations of one model image, and so on. But that's one example.
Thanks, Miklos. Silly question, but yeah, eager.
No, not at all.
Thank you very much, Miklos. I just wanted to mention one gotcha that that was difficult for me to understand in my first journey to the layout. It was the layout term itself. I quickly realized that there is something called layout in, for instance, view shells. And it took me quite some time to realize that it is another term for root frame, not for instance, layout frame. And it might be obvious, but it took me some time. And you already mentioned the other gotcha, which is SW flow frame is not a frame. Thank you very much. No questions from me.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Miklos. Next, I have Mohit, Michael Stoll. Questions? Okay. No questions. Neil. Okay, thank you. Sahil, Sarper, and Stefan.
No questions from me, thank you. Although it was quite hard for me to follow, but that might be because of focus issues. The talk was good.
Okay, thank you, Stefan.
And no questions from me either, but always interesting for somebody who managed to escape writer internals for 20 plus years to learn about something. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Just before we would finish, Mihail, do you have any comments? I did not hear anything. Tell me, what did I say incorrectly, or what would you add apart from redlining?
Yeah, I don't really have a question, more of a comment. So with regard to multiple layouts, I see there are more problems in writer itself outside of the drawing layer. But yeah, maybe I should mention that next week. Don't want to hold up this talk much longer.
Thanks. It's always good to be aware of more problems so we can solve them all.
Okay, Thank you. I think that's it. See you next week. Bye bye.
Bye bye.